Romancing the Divine, a story about true love by Don Nori. Chapter 1. I remember the spectacular purity and unutterable beauty of his words to me. How gentle he was, how very gentle. I saw things that I never dreamed or imagined, like that smile of his as he looked at me. It was so wonderful, so approving, almost as though he did not really know what was hidden inside of me. But that was the wonder of it all. He did know what was inside of me and still is inside of me, and yet he loved me in spite of it all. I think that was the first time I stopped squirming as he held me in his arms. Wow, how many years did it take me to realize that it was a good thing to be in the presence of God, to be held and loved by his presence? I must admit, though, at first I looked at him a little warily, but it was only for a moment. We are taught to fear God in order to serve him, that punishment is our lot as a Christian, and that no one will ever see God's face and live. But there I sat, peering into this smiling face that obviously had not a trace of condemnation on it. And I lived. What was he up to? Why was he smiling at me, loving me, holding me, yet knowing fully what was lodged inside me? His eyes were so clear I could not stop staring at him. I held my breath as I dared look deep into his heart. What a wonder. All I saw was love. Love and forgiveness. For me, yes, but also for humanity. All humanity throughout all time. Who could ever imagine such a thing? How totally pure, how totally full of compassion and hope he was. I looked for all that stuff the religious hucksters said was in God, but I couldn't see any of it there. There was no condemnation, no anger, and no memory of sin long ago repented for. There was only a longing for friendship, a desire for union with the likes of me. It began to shatter all my fears and preconceptions of who God was supposed to be. But there was something else that I had never heard about, something no one had ever told me was in the heart of the Lord. Amazing. His heart was full of dreams. Dreams for me, dreams for each person who had ever been conceived. They were wonderful dreams, astonishing possibilities. Such mighty dreams they were, too. Dreams to win, to succeed, to flourish. Dreams to invent, to discover, to write. Dreams to change the thoughts of man, to lead nations, to raise children who would carry the torch of his life to generations yet unborn. All these dreams were intricately and lovingly woven together into a tapestry of his will that transcended the ages and brought God's ultimate purpose for this planet into being. Surely only angels saw such wonders, or so I thought. You have such stunning dreams for us. Your plans are so awesome, I ventured to say to him. Why is it that, well, that it doesn't seem to come to pass? He finished the question I wanted to ask him, but just couldn't. The beauty of those dreams goes far beyond their outcome. Its beauty is birthed in the hearts of those who freely give themselves to say yes to what I have for them. Of course, the dreams are sovereign, but I have no puppets, no slaves, no forced laborers. They are so pure that any intervention by fear or control would taint their beauty and destroy their intention. So I have been patiently waiting for you to respond, for you to say yes, to see purpose and fulfillment and beauty beyond yourself, beyond your own needs and wants. Well, when I heard that, I found myself praying prayers I never thought I would ever hear myself pray. Lord, have your way in me. I give myself to you. Please take control of my life. I want your dreams for me to come to pass, every one of them. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in me. Teach me to say yes. It was the first time I really believed that he loved me. It seemed that his love poured out of eternity itself with an orchestra of light and sound and hope and every possibility that a man can ever desire to contain. There I sat in his arms, looking intently into his eyes so clear, so pure, that I could see to the depths of his heart. Come, my son, let me show you my love for you. Let me show you the power of eternity and what awaits you in this life. Let me show you what yes can do. Immediately, I saw back into the beginning of something, or was it the middle of something? I guess I really do not know what place in time or out of time it was. All I knew was that I heard the very compassion of our Lord as he spoke words that seemed to transcend the ages. Who has believed our report? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? His words were so penetrating, so heart-piercing. I could see through the ages as his words seemed to fill the air with their power. They went out of his mouth like mighty arrows flying through eternity, breaking swiftly into time and space as if on individual missions sent from the heart of the Lord himself. His words swept through continents and blew over nations and peoples. For he grew up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of dry ground. The gentleness and yet the urgency of his love was nearly more than I could contain, as he proclaimed to his creation, "He has no stately form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should be attracted to him." The inner melody of his tender love began to draw many people from every land and from every age. His words echoed with great determination and assurance as people responded to them. I watched his words being delivered to hearts without regard to times, epochs, nationalities, or governments, and in spite of religions and institutions. Barriers between men began to crumble as I watched in total awe the wonder of the new birth taking place in the hearts of literally hundreds of millions of people throughout time. His words rattled the very foundations of the earth as he declared, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we gave him no esteem." I could see more clearly now as my heart yielded to his. His words were not falling randomly. Instead, each one was carefully captured and carried to an individual human soul, purposefully, lovingly, longingly. It was as though the Lord had addressed each word to a particular person in a methodical, carefully planned dissemination of his love for all the ages. Folks continued to come to him beyond numbers. They were responding to his mighty love. He watched patiently as his word transformed nation after nation in millennium after millennium. He paused with a great sigh as he looked over the masses, over the nations throughout which the angels were being sent. A heaviness seemed to overwhelm him as he cried out once again, "Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows." I never before understood how intensely love can empower or bring pain. Was it the pain of sorrow, or was it the depths of his eternal love that caused him to cry out with such determined finality, "But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities"? Whatever moved him, one thing was certain. The power of his love was unmistakably the greatest force in the universe. Neither time nor space could contain it. Law, theology, government, the pride or greed of man, none of it could withstand the convincing, penetrating splendor of his extraordinary love. Oh, the drawing power of his love, as countless numbers were melted by his tenderness. So many were healed in all millennia. So many called upon him, and every time under the sun, one word spoken from the very life of the Father did what no mere mortal man could ever hope to do, even in a lifetime. It was inconceivable to the human mind. I was beginning to realize that I was privileged to see God's mighty power ignoring the boundaries of men and nations and time itself. Not even the constraints of nature could contain the determined love of an all-powerful God, a God who would pay the ultimate price for the redemption of a fallen, rebellious race. It was almost as though he had already felt the pain of releasing his son to death so very long before it actually happened in time. Yet his voice was commanding, his determination unflinching, his resolve unchangeable. His word would reach everyone in every epoch. Everyone would hear, everyone would know, everyone would say yes. His voice smashed the sacred theologies of carnal men as easily as he had broken through time. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes We are healed. Human words in any language cannot begin to describe the events that followed as more and more people fell to their knees, responding to this eternal love. Marriages were being mended, families were being restored, broken dreams were being recovered, entire nations were being drawn to his light, and hope was being recaptured in the hearts of a myriad of new believers. Humanity was discovering the never-ending, never-failing compassion of our Lord, who never stops wooing, never stops loving, and never ever gives up on even the most stubborn of his children. Then, almost on cue, the redeemed paused and looked up. With one powerful voice of gratefulness and thanksgiving, they began to worship the Lord with thunderous praise and a crescendo of worship that seemed to rock even the foundation of his mighty throne. The sound filled heaven and resounded again and again back to the earth as the angels continued their systematic administration of his love throughout the earth without distraction, even in the midst of such a universal, multidimensional, time-ignoring shout of worship to him who sits on the throne. I found myself weeping for joy there in his presence, watching the power of his word perform all it was intended to do. The Lord turned to me and spoke. This is but the door through which my people will experience eternity while they yet dwell in their mortal bodies. I have gathered a spiritual people for a destiny that you cannot yet comprehend.